today we're focusing on the tax side of things, right? So we're in our last week of the tax classes, so week 17, and we're focusing on the shareholder agreement. And I think most life insurance professionals have kind of heard this as maybe the holy grail of being able to make a big case, right? This is where the rubber really meets the road on big tax planning, insurance planning, and what is our role and what do we need to understand? So this is our, if we flip ahead here, this is our, final week on taxation. We've been going through the PPI's guide for life insurance. And over the last couple of weeks, we've been covering quite a few different areas of taxation. And really, this is a fantastic book. Thank you, PPI, for this book. I think it's a great refresher on an annual basis, a great reference on the bookshelf to come back to when in doubt. And it really summarizes our key role before you have to get the accountants in. So we focused on post-mortem planning, right? Which I know we laughed about that word and what does that even mean? Estate planning versus post-mortem planning. We focused on that one. And we talked a lot about the roll and redeem strategy, of course, which I know we're a big fan of for the operating business and, working through that piece. And now we're really focusing on, again, that shareholder agreement. And it's important, again, to touch on this. I know we touched on it before, but the shareholder agreement is the larger document. It's the agreement between the shareholders, kind of the prenup between the shareholders of how does when the rubber meets the road, what are we deciding to do for our breakup? And that can mean death. And that's where the buy-sell agreement comes in and how we can fund it in a more efficient way, right? And I like this slide here. What is our role here, right? The advisor's guide to life insurance. But for us, I think it's important to understand the product, right? It's understanding the product we're selling, and the tax is great, but how do we match that to the product, right? Which is really the focus of what we're trying to do here. And the book has a lot of information. It's great information. Read through. I highly recommend reading through it all, right? But some of the biggest things that we talked about before is portability of the policies. How do we make sure that this is portable and flexible for when you likely want to sell your operating business? How are the valuations going to be determined? There's lots to think about when you're working through these structures, right?
I think you did it. 5 minutes, and this is the last slide.
This is it here, right? And this is very important, right? The operating business. I have never met a business owner who wants to operate their business until the day they die, right? At some point in time, they want to sever that piece off. It's what they're doing. But the why is our family, it's our goals, it's everybody in our kind of circle, right? Is why we're doing it. So when we're structuring these policies, we need to think about our duty to the corporation and making sure that we have, the money to fund the corporation to redeem our shares and have that, that funding. But likely we want to, if we can, get that policy in our holdco, because when we walk away from our operating business, we want to walk away with that policy. That gives us all kinds of options, flexibility that I know you're going to talk about, Jeff, as far as, what can we do in the future? We probably want that policy, right?
Well, you used up all my time. I can't.
Well, go ahead, Jeff. I'll pass it to you.
No, that's okay. I was doing this thing about the CFO, which I think is important, but I got 5 here, but each one is the application. Once the persons you're dealing with for the shareholders agreement decide what they want to do, my position, I strongly feel from a whole bunch of perspectives, mostly tax, safety, importance, convenience, you should try to have the policies in the holdco. And I know there's the Roy case, and I know there's all sorts of issues. I still think it's very straightforward. Maybe we need a tax expert, but
you got to understand shareholder benefits in 267, but it can be done.
It should be done. It's the only thing that makes sense from a planning perspective. But now we're funding it, and once we are doing it from the holdco, each shareholder gets to decide what he or she wants to do in their own company for their benefit, for the family's benefit, and you make the opco beneficiary to address it. It's just one of the uses of their life insurance portfolio in their holdco. So I go through all these strategies. We talk about this one in the class. We're going to go through it slowly. This is a big part of what we're doing. Even back then, I was trying to change the taxable amount because of the changes in the tax rates, right? But each of these are the things. When I do this buy term and invest the difference, which I'll talk about in the class, everyone gets so upset. The investment owner in this picture here can earn 7% after tax. Then buying term and investing the difference, that if he lives to 95, he'll have $3.7 million more. We can't be afraid to show the numbers, because the numbers and the assumptions belong to the client. We can suggest like 3% is a different number and see what it looks like. Then we talk about corporate estate bond. It's still one of our best presentations. What we've done is we've made the variables variable. There are assumptions being made. And guess what? If you change the assumptions, you change the outcome, and then you can see based on your assumptions, alternative assumptions. To me, this is the only fair way to compare life insurance against the alternatives. And we go through the math. And what you're going to see here is I keep going. And eventually, this one was an important one that we're not going to talk about till class. This is the immediate financing arrangement.
Careful there.
Careful there to demonstrate it's a lot of calculations to make sure you got it right. And then following through becomes another challenge. But this is the one I was all excited about showing you, because that calculation we were doing before, what I show is there's going to be double tax on the first one. You can now measure the comparison between the corporate investment and how many dollars insurance will be ahead with the math. And as you said, Mitchell, when we were talking about this last week, it doesn't really matter what you do. If you put in reasonable assumptions and you're using a corporation and they're putting money in there and you're looking at the net to estate, you don't even have to do a lot of planning. It creates additional values regardless of what way, because of CDA. And we all know that.
And measure quick and measure often, right?
Measure quick and measure. So that's it. At least we're having fun. That's the important thing. Keep having fun. Oh, okay.